another episode of the Claus Corner, the Zoom edition. Today's guest is a pastor, magician, author, motivational speaker, podcaster, and television host. He has traveled all over the world motivating people to help them become their best possible self. Jeffrey Combs from Golden Mastermind said about my guest, he is about leadership, about being a master connector. Michael Rosen from Split Rock said, I have never seen a performer hold the audience in the palm of his hand like he did. Peter Minglis from PM Marketing raves, he is the real deal and has excellent content. Lastly, David Letterman from The Late Show proudly says, he seems like a nice guy. So please welcome to the Claus Corner, the multi-talented, the extremely fascinating, and a nice guy, Mr. Greg Dwyer.
Hey, thanks for having me, Rich.
Greg, so glad to have you on the show. So, as I've mentioned in the intro, you wear many hats, and I want to go over everything. So let's start with you as a pastor. When and why did you decide that that was the path to take?
Wow, that's a long story. That could take an hour, so let me see if I can boil that down. My mom was really religious, very religious. We were raised Catholic. She had a big impact on my development. While she was alive, I really didn't listen really to what she had to say. But she died when I was 15. In fact, she died this last week, 42 years ago. And she really had an impact on my spiritual development after she left. And to make a long story short, I was doing a magic show in Connecticut because I was a magician at the time. And one of the ladies that was working backstage was doing the costumes. And we were still in high school, but I was performing semi-professionally. And she said, hey, look, my dad says if you're going to date me, you got to come to church with me. So you know how that is. So I dated her, but I also went to her church. And so, one thing led to another, and I started listening to what the minister had to say. And that's the short version. So that's like 20, 30 years ago. And I've been doing that all over the country, Pennsylvania, New York, down in New Jersey, the tri-state area. Now I'm in Connecticut.
What denomination are you?
Lutheran, yeah.
Okay. So do you have your own? I know you said you've been a pastor all over the world or all over the country. Do you have a church of your own?
Yes, I do. It's a part-time position. It's in Connecticut, north of Hartford. It's part-time. So when I'm not doing that, I'm working on my business, which is a consulting business, a speaking business, and then a travel business. So right now I'm focusing on three things. Because of what's going on right now in 2020, it's a little difficult to focus on anything other than just really focusing on sharpening your marketing materials. But as far as like speaking and traveling, it's pretty much come to an end.
Yeah, that must be tough because as we're recording this, it's in the middle of the pandemic, and everything you do involves crowds of people.
Right.
Pastor, motivational speaking, magician. So what are you doing now?
Well, right now I'm focusing on my website, which is gregdwyer.com. We basically gave it a facelift. We're also working on some marketing. I work with a couple people that help me with that. I'm planning for 2021 for travel to Israel. You always have to plan. But right now we're in election year and we're like 3-4 weeks away. So a lot of people don't do many things in election years, even though we're facing this 2020 situation with the virus. People have a tendency to want to wait and see. So I'm just kind of putting everything on hold when it comes to travel. Luckily, and I'm grateful that the church is open. We did close, but we went online for about 4 or 5 months. And then we opened up, I think it was May 31st.
And where can people find your service?
If they go to Zion Lutheran Church in Facebook, for some reason we got the handle, which is kind of cool. So on Facebook, and you go to the top left-hand corner, and you just type in Zion, Z-I-O-N, Lutheran Church. We do a service at 9:30. It's live, and then it's uploaded, within a couple days, and you can watch it there.
You know what I found impressive, because I grew up Protestant, and my pastor, Reverend Haggard, he's hilarious. He had such a great sense of humor. And I always told him, I said, I love the fact that you make each week original and fresh. I said, how do you do it with the stories don't change for the most part. What's your secret in keeping the stories fresh? Do you incorporate current events into what's happening now? Like what's happening now with the Old Testament and New Testament?
Yeah, I mean, what I tend to focus on is the Old Testament and the New Testament, how they tie together. Yeah. But you know what? You also have to tie in with what's going on. You can't be political. You can't be too to the nerve because you could alienate people. But
Yeah.
what I love to do is make people think. You know, I have a television show. You've been on the television show. Purpose of that is to get people to think. The name of it is called Mindful Conversations. So I don't want to be boring. I don't want to put people to sleep. So I vacillate between the biblical text and then at the same time, hey, how is this playing out in the world today, or how does it relate to you? You know, and I think, yeah, the story's the same, but the story's familiar in the sense that it can apply to us in 2020, or it can apply to us 10 years from now.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you mentioned you were going on a trip to Israel. Have you ever been there before?
10 times.
10 times.
10
Wow.
times. Yeah. Yeah. I've been doing this for over a decade. So I started in 2009. Prior to that, I went on a familiarization tour and I just fell in love with it. And so we'll take 25 to 50 people every year, sometimes twice a year. I don't lead the tours. What I do is I organize the tours and I hand them over to a friend of mine. His name is Iyad, and he's been doing this for like 25 years. Unfortunately, the people that I know in Bethlehem and in Israel, none of them are working since, I guess it was March. Everything, in fact, they're in lockdown right now. So it's kind of sad. They have no income. The travel industry is completely dead. You're talking hotels, you're talking restaurants, you're talking the shops that sell souvenirs. They haven't seen anybody. It's really sad, very sad.
That is very sad. Hopefully life will get somewhat back to normal sometime soon, whatever normal is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been so long, I don't even know what normal will be. But you've been to
Well, wait a
Israel.
minute. You're not normal, and neither am I. So it doesn't really matter. We don't fit into society.
That could be why I don't know what normal is.
Yeah, what does it matter?
Exactly. As long as we're having a good time, and it seems like we both are.
Yeah, we are.
I mentioned, though, that you said Israel 10 times. Where else have you traveled?
All of your Greece, Germany, Turkey, Ireland, Italy. What happened was I started for a college in 2009, and I was their alumni director, which was really a person that was raising money and funds, like a development director. And so one of the things we did is we took our alumni on trips. So the first trip was to Israel, to Rome, then we went to Greece. So I've been all over the place. It's wonderful. Europe, I haven't been to China. I haven't been to what is it? The Asian countries.
Yeah.
You know, but I've been mostly to Europe. Yeah.
Now, what do you do on these trips? Because it's a tour.
It's a tour, so there's an itinerary, you know, and it's boilerplate. These people have been doing it for years. And so every day there's free time, but there's also a guide that's going to explain what's going on. And so it's really nice. I mean, the average person's in their 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Yeah.
So it's retired people. It's people that can get away. They have the time, and they also have $3,000 or $4,000 to spend, you know.
Must be nice. Now, you're hoping to go back in 2021. If people want to sign up for your trip, how and where can they sign up?
The best way is go to gregdwyer.net. So there's a couple Greg Dwyers out there as far as websites that I know, but the one that's for travel is gregdwyer.net. Right now we're doing a specific travel event with the Dilly Show. The guy's on YouTube. He's got like 1 million subscribers and followers. And I think we're leaving November 30th of 2021. But I'm either going to put together another tour sometime that December of 2021, or I'm going to do a tour in January 2022. You know, it's crazy for me to think about these dates. You know, when you're in the travel business, you're always thinking a year out or 3 years out or 4 years out. And it's kind of sad, you know, 2025, 2030, 2050. We have a trip for 2050, you know, it's crazy.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Knows what you're going to be doing in 2050. So, you know, I'm going to put down some money now, and who knows where you're going to be. So, but check it out. I would love to go on one of those trips. The only place I ever went to that far on a trip was Romania. I had the best time.
Wait a minute. What were you doing there? Were you hanging out in the Black Sea? What was going on? What did you do there?
Yeah, I was reading the Dead Sea Scrolls for fun. No, what I was doing was, I love horror movies and I love history. So it was Dracula, Son of the Dragon, and Vlad the Impaler. So what they did was half of the tour, and my tour guide's name was Radu. So he took us all over to we spent Halloween night in Dracula's castle, the real Vlad the Impaler. Then
no way.
Swear to God, I'll show you pictures next time I see it. But it was a great trip. Okay. It was 2005. It was 9 nights, 8 days. had the best time. But it was basically what you just said. We had an itinerary, and we went to all these different places. We had where Vlad's bones supposedly were, but they found out later that when they dug him up, it was cat and dog bones. We had to take a rowboat out to that area. It was a convent or a monastery. It was in the middle of the ocean. It was a great trip, and I highly recommend. The other place I would really love to go to, I'm not sure if you did, was Egypt. I would love to check out the pyramids.
No, I haven't been to Egypt. I've flirted with the idea. I've been close to it. But I will tell you, this might impress you. I spent Halloween in Ireland, Dublin. That was kind of cool.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
So the two coolest places I spent Halloween, because Halloween is my favorite holiday, because I just love, like I mentioned, horror movies, the paranormal. We talked about that on your radio show, is Salem and Romania, Transylvania.
Now, did you go to Salem on October 31st?
Yes. And it's funny because that is their Christmas. It was nonstop. People are dancing in the street. Everybody's got costumes on. It was a great time.
I did it once, but the thing is you can't move 5 feet. It takes an hour.
Yeah, no, that part is true. It's similar to New Year's Eve in New York City.
Right.
Dropping of the ball. So it's similar to that, yeah.
And the thing is, though, the thing about Salem is at 10 o'clock at night, it's over. Like on Halloween night, 10 o'clock, everybody goes home, and you're thinking, wow, it's amazing.
That is very true. It's almost like Connecticut.
Yeah.
But speaking of New York, I mentioned somebody that said, Greg seems like a nice guy. Tell me about your experience being on Late Show with David Letterman.
Okay, so the story is simple. I grew up in Connecticut, and I moved out to Missouri, and I went to college and graduate work, and I was pretty homesick for Connecticut, New York. And so one day while I was at the seminary, the graduate work, I turned on this guy, probably was, I don't know, 80, maybe 87, 89, late 80s, right? And so to make a long story short, I see this guy, David Letterman, acting like a crazy goof in New York City, and I was really homesick. So I eventually got back to Connecticut, but one of the things I decided to do is to go to the show dressed like a clergy, right? Black, white, right? And I sat in the second row. And as I was sitting there, the cameraman was, pointing the camera at me. He had one of those cameras that he was holding over his shoulders. And so during the top 10, David Letterman stops the top 10 and starts talking to me, while they're taping the show. And Rupert G., who has a what do you call it, a deli, right
Deli.
On 53rd in Broadway, was doing this running gag with Kelsey Grammer. So Dave asked me if I wanted to participate. So I just jumped out of the chair, walked up on stage, went over to 53rd and Broadway, and I was on with Kelsey Grammer, the Foo Fighters. Are you a big fan of the Foo Fighters?
Big role.
So they were on, and so 6 million people. And this was what, 95? When people used to watch TV, 6 million people saw it. And I got cards and letters and faxes for about a month. And I also got paid. I got paid twice, the first time and then when it went on cable. So it was kind of like 15 minutes of fame.
It was hilarious because the whole bit was, he owns a deli, Rupert G. I have pictures with him. As you're watching this right now, you'll see a picture of me and Rupert G. But it was, Greg Dwyer is going to touch the meat. So you went in and touched the cold cut. Yeah, they had the cold cut. So basically, it's like, Greg, the pastor, is going to touch the meat right now. So he was being, the double entendres. It was hilarious. I thought it was great.
And, David got a little bit of pushback on that because one of my friends, Steve, was in the audience while I was over at 53rd and Broadway. He kind of got booed. So, he kind of couldn't. Yeah, because, it's kind of a sensitive, it's no. I just wanted to meet Dave and I wanted to be on the show and it was cool. But yeah, you push the envelope too far and it becomes a little crazy. But I will tell you, I meet people today that say, I saw you on that show. It's insane. It's completely nuts. And then people thought when I walked out of the stage door that I was a plant, that I was an actor. And none of it was that way.
Yeah, that was hilarious. Did you have a chance to talk to him?
I did, but not after the show. I did talk to Paul. I went into the green room. I had to sign some kind of financial paperwork. But what I hear about Dave is he's pretty quiet. He doesn't meet with people before or after. So no, it was just saying hello to him, shaking his hand, and that was it. But it was fun. It really made my day.
What I heard too is I've been to 3 tapings of his show, and I saw it firsthand. Many of the guests said he makes me feel so uncomfortable because as soon as the camera goes off for a commercial, He stops talking. He just looks right. The guy's doing his makeup and his hair. He won't talk to the guests, and then he completely shuts off. And then when the camera's back on, hey, how you doing? So yeah, he's very, very impersonal from what other guests have said. And I saw it firsthand watching the show being taped, and you were there as well. So I'm sure. But you know what? Out of all the late night show hosts, besides obviously the classics like Johnny Carson and Jack Benny, Letterman's my favorite. The guy I think is an innovator.
I did go out to California and I saw Jay Leno, and the difference was Jay came out in a pair of jeans and a nice sweater or shirt or whatever, and he did talk to people. I got an autograph from him, but he warmed up the audience, where Dave Letterman, he didn't warm up the audience at all. I can't imagine it. Can you imagine doing that many shows over 30, 40 years? After a while, when you're driving home that night, you probably forgot who the guest was.
No, exactly. Yeah. So I like David Letterman's sense of humor. His sense of humor is more like mine. I love the sarcastic sense of humor. Jay Leno was a good host, but after Johnny Carson, it's kind of hard to top that. So I'm glad you had your Andy Warhol 15 minutes of fame. I thought it was hilarious. Check it out on YouTube. David Letterman Top 10, Greg Dwyer. Now, you were a pastor and you traveled all over the world. I want to get into, you mentioned it earlier, you're a magician. When did you get into that?
Well, I'm not currently a magician. I mean, I love the art, but I don't perform magic anymore. I don't do television shows, magic shows, kids shows, or anything like that. But what it was is I was over at my grandmother's house. I probably was one of the holidays. And my uncle was a dancer, and his wife, my aunt, was a dancer. They traveled all over the world. They were involved in show business. They hung out with people like Jack Cassidy and Shirley Jones. And, they were into that sort of scene. So one day I'm sitting at the table at my grandmother's house, and my uncle picks up a quarter between his forefinger and his thumb. And he goes like this, and he made it disappear. And I went, what? And that was it. And so he showed it to me. And I think the next year I got a magic kit for Christmas. And then after that, I got another magic kit. And then what I did, now this is going to reveal a lot about me. What I did is I took these small magic kits and I bundled them together, Rich, and I took them to school and I showed the kids, and then I sold them. So I said to them, I said, the trick is told when the trick is sold. So if you want to buy it, it's $5. So I sold all these individual pieces, and I took the money down to Tannen's, which is a famous magic shop in New York City. Yeah. And I bought myself my first dove pan. And then from there I got lessons. And then from there I was doing $30, 30-minute shows for kids for birthdays. And then by the time I was in high school, I was winning awards. I was doing magic semi-professionally and wanted to be a magician. And I would say, luckily, I got off that path around 81, 82, and eventually went to college and graduate work. It's not easy being a professional magician at all. And I'm glad I didn't do it. You know what I mean? So.
Well, when I speak to musicians, most of the time they'll say, I got into music watching the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. Now, for you as a magician, did you get into magic watching or seeing clips of Harry Houdini?
No, you know who really, maybe, I mean, I did admire him, but really who influenced me the most was Doug Henning. Do you know the story?
No, I know the story, but I want my viewers to hear the story. Doug Henning growing up was probably my favorite magician because I'll get into a little bit. I think Copperfield is a little too arrogant. He's too flashy. Henning was just a hippie, and he was hilarious. Yeah. It's all an illusion. So,
and you can do it too.
I used to, back in the 70s when we were young, they had these specials on Sunday, ABC, and Doug Henning had a couple specials on. I remember watching that. But you have a special connection with Doug Henning. Tell me about that.
Well, I think it was 74, 75 was his first show. It was around Christmas time. And I was a kid, right? I was a young guy in high school, but I looked up to him. But I worked in the AV department at the high school. So what I did is I took the big tapes and I put them in, and I would record it on a Wednesday and come back the next day on a Thursday and try to watch it to see what he was doing, What happened was I was working in the theater, Summer Stock in Candlewood Theater in New Fairfield, and the magic show, which was the Broadway show that he performed in, was on Summer Stock. Now, I never got to meet Doug. I wish I did. I got to meet his understudy. His name was Joe Olibaldo, and he was really just an actor playing the part. But I got to work in the props department backstage for the magic show for like a week. And so if you go to my website, it'll say that I worked backstage with Doug Henning, the magic show, which is true. I
Yeah.
never worked with Doug, but I did work with the show. But it was wonderful. We had to sign a contract saying that we wouldn't what's the word? What am I looking for? Divulge.
Divulge.
Thank you. Yeah, divulge. How things were done, and it was a wonderful experience. It was wonderful. Yeah.
Well, what's funny? Two of my favorite magicians right now, currently, are Penn and Teller, and I'll tell you why I love them. Yeah,
I
love
know
Penn and
why
Teller.
you love them.
No, because they show you exactly how it's being done, but they do it so well in such a funny way. You're like, what just happened? And then they do it again. All right, we're going to do it a little bit slower this time. This is exactly how the trick was done. Like, whoa, it's even more confusing the second time. So I love the fact that they make fun of magic, but they're serious about it. I've seen them several times in New York. I saw them at the Bushnell. I saw them at the Warner, and over the last 20 years, and they just get better and better. And the last one I saw was their Vegas show. They brought it to New York City, but that's when they have a show called Bullshit, which I love too because they debunk a lot of things. They debunk the paranormal. They debunk Ouija boards. They debunk all these different bottled water is one of the things they debunk. It's just I'd like the fact that they don't take themselves too seriously, and that's why I think I'm not a big fan of David Copperfield, because I think he does take himself too seriously, and he's just he's a lot of show and a lot of flash, but not a lot of content for me.
Yeah, when it comes to Penn and Teller, they're not very religious either. When it comes to spirituality, they attack the whole thing about God, and so I saw them years ago. I think it was in Ohio. And after the show was over, Penn and Teller were standing in the lobby, and I shook their hands, and I was talking. I guess it was Penn. And so I says, "Oh yeah, I enjoyed the show." And I told him what I did for a living, and he goes, "You're not our demographic." And I go, "Yeah, I know. I just overlooked it." But yeah.
No, he's definitely a huge atheist. He said his proudest moment was making the kid in getting kicked out of Catholic school for making the other students atheists.
I think there's a story behind it. What I hear, and I don't know if it's true, I hear the story behind his mother died when he was a kid, and he was praying. Maybe it was his father, I don't know. But he was praying, "Dear God, if my mom or dad could live, I'll believe in you." And apparently the parent died. And I don't know if that's true, but that's what I heard.
That sounds about right, because I know that he has a huge thing on debunking talking to the dead, and he proved how easy it is to do. He has somebody come in, one of his friends, and people are crying, "Oh my God, I talked to my mother, I talked to my father," and they're like, "All right, his real name is Bob, and he's our friend. He has no clue about how to do this. He's just making it up as he goes along." But so that there could be something to that. What's your opinion on David Blaine? Because he is more of Houdini was into endurance. Besides being a magician, and David Blaine seems to take that to the extreme too, trying to see, being in a block of ice for 3 days, being underwater for a week. Do you like that kind of magic as well? I mean, it's magic / endurance.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm not a big fan of magic as I was back in the 70s, early 80s. I was in Vegas one time for a convention back to back, and I must have seen 20 magic shows. I mean, I'm curious about magic. I like magic. I'll pick up a pack of cards, maybe do a card trick. I don't really focus on magic tricks that much. I did see David Blaine. It was about 2 or 3 years ago. He's in Connecticut here. And he did a show, very bizarre stuff, holding his breath underwater. He just did something on YouTube, I think 3-4 weeks ago. Did you see it? Called Ascent?
Yeah. Because he had the balloons, and they picked them up.
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy. I wouldn't do that. I mean, he was up so high, they had to give him oxygen. I mean, that's pretty high.
Yeah, no, I've seen him twice. I happened to be in New York twice. Once when he was underwater back in the late 90s, and maybe 2 years later when he was in a block of ice. And I find it interesting, and I love the fact that he takes endurance to the extreme level and shows what the human body can do under extreme conditions. But I'm still going to go with, like, for magic, I like the good old fashioned Penn and Teller.
Yeah, I think he did something in New York a couple years ago. Maybe I'm getting this wrong, but I think it was David Blaine. He was hung upside down for like a week. Do you remember this?
Yes, you do.
And then at the end, they kind of let him go, and he descended down towards the ground, and then he went up and disappeared. And I think people took pictures with their cell phone, and they saw these giant black helium balloons that were flying them over to the next town. Do you remember that?
I do.
Okay.
I didn't see the whole thing. It was on TV, and he was hanging up. I think it was by one leg or something.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of controversy about that, saying how he did it and how he faked it, and like how he really wasn't doing that the whole time. But I guess to each their own. We'll never know. Do you know a lot of the tricks and how they're done when you see these magicians doing them? Like, oh, I know how that's done.
Yes and no. Some of the haven't changed, right? So I'll watch something and I'll go, yeah, I've done it, been there, seen it. I saw Henning do it or whatever. But in the last 25 years that I've been away from it, things have changed in the last 25 years. So I was out in Vegas. I saw Jerry McCambridge and I saw his show, The Mentalist. And I'm sitting there going, I don't get this. Now I understand what he's doing because I've been to a couple conventions. I started, actually, listen to this. I started on October 26th, 4 years ago, with a show called The Magic of Communication. And so it was really like a personal growth, motivational, but it had magic in it. So I had to basically dip my toe back into the industry. And what I learned over the last 25 years is a lot has changed. Stuff that didn't exist 25 years ago, you couldn't do. Now you can. And so there's certain things I do, and then other things to this day, I don't know. And some of the friends that I still associate with, they won't tell you. They'll say, listen, it's a secret. And another thing is, some of these secrets are so expensive that you could never find out. Like David Copperfield, when you go to his show in Vegas, some of his illusions, he paid off the developer. So the guy created a magic trick or an illusion, and David paid them like $5 million or $2 million and said, look, don't sell this to anybody. This is my patent. So there's some things I do and some things I have no idea, which is nice because I like to be fooled. I think most people like to be fooled.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think my favorite trick from David Copperfield is making himself a believable actor in the horror movie Terror Train.
Oh, you remember that? Oh,
yeah.
My goodness, you're dating yourself. I remember that. Yeah.
1980, Jamie Lee Curtis, David Copperfield.
Yeah, I was in high school. I went to see that. Yeah. It's crazy. I can't believe you remember that.
I love that movie.
What about the movie? What about the movie Magic with the guy with the dummy?
Anthony Hopkins. Anthony Hopkins.
Oh my goodness.
And Anne Margaret. That is another great movie. It's because
you don't have that movie. You have that movie on DVD?
I do. I have both movies.
I want to borrow that. I'll borrow that from you.
It's such a great. It's funny that you mentioned that because I saw that maybe about 6-7 months ago, and it's just as good as it was. It didn't age for me. Sometimes you watch a movie from the 70s, like, oh boy, this is really dated. This was so great because I love horror movies, but even more than that, I love psychological thrillers, and that's what that movie was. It was a horror movie. It was a great cycle. It had a great story, great characters, great acting, and all around. I highly recommend that movie, Magic, 1978, with Anthony Hopkins and Anne Margaret.
Yeah, when I watched not David, what's his name? Doug. When I watch Doug Henning, the reruns, I go on YouTube and I watch him. I go, how come I like this guy? I mean, because he's so dated. He's got the bell bottoms, dancing around with the silks, and I'm like, I can't believe as a young kid I really looked up to this guy because he's so tied into the culture. Oh
yeah, no, I do the same thing. I watch it on YouTube, but maybe it's more for nostalgic reasons, but I love it. I think it's hilarious, and he's still one of my favorite growing up. But Magic is a great segue into what you do now, motivational speaking. So tell me how you incorporate magic into motivating people.
Well, I was down in Long Island, and I noticed there was a magic shop in, I would say, an hour, 15, 20 minutes. I guess it was more like 25 minutes away from where I was working. And so I went back into the magic shop and I started talking to some people, and I thought, well, this would be interesting to incorporate this. And so it was Easter Sunday, I walked out with the newspaper. Do you remember Doug Henning doing this? Where he opens up the newspaper and shows it and then rips it up and then flips it and it restores. So nobody from my church knew that I had an interest in magic. So one Sunday, it was an Easter Sunday, I walked out with a newspaper and I told a story about necessarily good in the newspaper. And I started ripping it up and tying it into Good Friday and how they treated Christ, pretty badly. And I took the newspaper and I flipped it and it restored, resurrection, right? And you could hear the people gasping in the church. I mean, you literally could hear the air go out of the room. And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be nice to combine magic with motivational speaking? So 4 years ago, October 26th, what would that be, 2016, I put together this thing called the Magic of Communication. It was 12 effects with motivational thinking in between it. It was good. It's not what I do now. And so for the last 4 years, I've been kind of taking things out and morphing it and working on it. It's my life, it's my passion. And after 4 years, instead of the Magic of Communication, it's called the Power of Focus. And so it's a hour workshop lecture keynote with very little magic in it. There's a little bit of magic, but not a lot. You know, anybody that would come to the lecture would not say, hey, this guy's a magician. I'm not a magician. I'm a motivational speaker. So in the last 4 years, I've been working on it and just making it better. And for me, I think it's really important, especially what we're going through right now, because people are all over the place. You know, they can't focus on what's really important in their life.
I love your tagline, the art of distraction meets the science of focus.
Right, right. Well, because, you know, as a magician, I know how to deceive people. I now, you know, when my uncle took that quarter and made it disappear, basically that's the whole philosophy, you know, the hand's quicker than the eye. But I think the problem that most of us experience in life is that it's easy for us to get distracted. We pick up our cell phone. I mean, how often does that happen every single day? And, you know, we say we want to get something done, but it's so easy for us to get distracted. And then before you know it, the day's over, the week's over, the month's over, the year's over, and we haven't accomplished what we say we're going to do. And it's kind of sad.
I have so many interests. I like, you know, as you know, I've written a book, I've done stand-up comedy, I've done motivational speaking, doing some gigs with you. And I want to thank you very much for having me be a part of that. But what I like to do is, all right, I'll get home from work. All right, for an hour, I'm going to work on this. For a half hour, I'm going to work on this. I try to like divide my time so I get everything done because, like you said, it's so easy to just eat, sit down on the couch and go, oh, all right. And the next thing you know, it's 10:30 at night. Like, all right, I have to get ready, go to bed for work tomorrow. So, yeah, so I try to like divide my time. Let me do this. And then I feel accomplished when I do that. Like, instead of just like, oh, I got nothing done. Like you said, at the end of the week. So I like the fact that I have a little, it's not really a regimen. I do it when I have to do it. And if, you know, if I make other plans, I don't stick to it if I have other plans, but I try to, whatever needs to get done, I will get done. So I do like, I've seen you several times speak. And I want to talk to you about that because the first time I saw you was maybe 2 years ago. And then I didn't see you for 6-7 months and you were completely changed the whole way you do your motivational speaking. Mm-hmm. Did you have somebody help you with that or did you come up with that all on your own?
No, I've had a few people help me. One guy, his name is Tim David in Massachusetts. He's been speaking for years. He used to be a magician. Now he's a speaker. He's written a couple books. The funny story about that is I ran into his book. I think it was Barnes & Noble or Borders many years ago. And then I joined a group of entrepreneurs and Tim happened to be in it. And then Tim and I became friends. He helped me. And then about a year ago, I hired a guy to take a look at my script and my messaging and to change it. So what I do now, and of course, I'm talking theory because I haven't given the lecture since COVID. I think the last lecture I gave was down in Westport. I think it was February, but it's changed tremendously. And it's changed for two reasons. Number one, the people that I have surrounded myself with who have given me feedback professionally. And the other thing is I've changed. Like I have really grown and figured this out. Like I'm obsessed on this. This is all I think about sometimes. And so I'm constantly thinking about it. So it really has been more of taking things out than adding things. Like I started with 12 magic tricks. Now I can walk in a room with just a die, you know, a dice, and that's it. I can do a whole hour without any props. But it's gone through an evolution and I'm really proud of it because it's taken me 4 years. And I think if anybody's going to do anything, you really want to surround yourself with people that can take you to the next level, because if they've done it, you can do it too, you know?
Well, no, as I mentioned, I've seen you several times and I love the fact that it's motivational, but you keep it interesting, you keep it fun, you keep it light, but you make so many great points. And by the end of your speech, you feel motivated, like, all right, I want to go take on the world. So yeah, you definitely, I mean, with what you've done yourself and with the help that you've had, you're heading in the right direction. So I know that you do libraries, you do schools, and you also help businesses. And you not only in a personal level, like I mentioned, but you help businesses engage employees improve productivity, increase revenue, and delight customers. So how'd you become such an expert with that?
Well, here's what I did. I did libraries for 2 years, and you want to be bad, not in your market. So
Yes.
I didn't want to call up Procter and Gamble. I didn't want to call up IBM and say, hey, let me work this material out. And so, like, you're a stand-up comedian. A lot of people like Jay Leno or David Letterman, all these people, if they're going to try out new material, they'll go to the comedy club. And so what I did for about a year and a half is I went to libraries all over Connecticut, and I tried out the material, and I recorded it. I went back, I scripted it. So I'm done with schools. I don't do any schools anymore. The last school I did was in Meriden with you, which was a great gig. But I don't do schools anymore. I don't do colleges. I don't go to libraries anymore. I have one library that I booked 2 years ago, and I think we're going to do it next year. But that's not what I do anymore. So what we did is we took this message and said, how can we reach people that are in the business world? Here's an interesting fact. Most people that work in an office are distracted every 3 minutes. So if you're in an office with 10 or 12 people, you have people that are doing their work, and every 3 minutes, the cell phone goes off, or there's a text, something on social media, YouTube, whatever. So the sad part about it is it takes a person about 25 minutes to get back on task. That's pretty bad. So I thought to myself, where can I make the greatest impact? And that's the business world, because people need to focus. And I've said this for years. Focus is important when it comes to leadership. If you have focus, you can be a good leader, so it's really essential for leadership.
Well, you mentioned that distractions cost American businesses $650 billion per year. Where'd you get that figure?
It's an online course. I think it's Udemy. Is that how you say it?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so we caught it for there. A friend of mine and I put together the website. We worked on it during the COVID, March, April, May, and June. And so he came up with the tagline, but he did the research. So I think underneath there's a little asterisk that says where that came from. So $650 billion of wasted money because people are wasted on doing other things. It's kind of sad.
Now, if a business wants to get in touch with you, where can they reach you?
The best place is just my name. My first name is Greg. My last name is Dwyer. So it's Greg, D as in day, Wednesday, Y as in yesterday, ER, just gregdwyer.com. Really simple. Yeah.
Do you have a certain fee that you charge?
Well, I was thinking about this today because I figured you were going to ask me. I've done pro bono. I've gone into churches and schools and places that are nonprofit, and I've charged nothing. And I've also had a sliding scale all the way up to $5,000. So, depending on where I have to go, if it's local, it's not going to be that much. If I got to get on a plane, which I can't wait to get on a plane, then it's going to be over $5,000. But depending on where it is, how I have to travel to it, or when do I have to get to it, how many people are in the room. So everything is negotiable.
And approximately how long do you speak for?
An hour. And I just added something that I didn't share with you. I'm also doing a 4-week follow-up course. So the people that are in the class or in the lecture, they have an opportunity to join a 4-week follow-up that supports what I talked about in the hour. So, not only are you listening to me for an hour speak about a topic that I really think is a life changer for you, you also have 4 weeks of follow-up training that keeps you on track.
Get your money's worth.
Yeah.
One of your goals is to teach how to sharpen your focus into a habit so it becomes automatic. How long does it take for a behavior to become a habit?
Well, some people say 60 days, but I think it takes longer than that. The longest I've ever gone, not biting my nails has been a year, right? And I don't bite my nails anymore, especially since of what happened in COVID as far as back in March. I don't think 30 days is enough. I don't think 60 days is enough. I think it takes longer than that. I think people underestimate, what they can do in a week or a month. I think it probably takes maybe 3 to 6 months. So it's really about rewiring your brain. And if you don't rewire your brain, you're going to fall into patterns of doing the same thing over and over again.
Similar to when people start off, after December 31st, that's it. I'm going to the gym. I'm going to go there every day. I'm going to get in the best shape of my life. And then January 15th, let me take one day off. Then January 16th, you know what? I'm so tired. I promise I'm going back on the 17th. And then you end up never going back. So yeah, to become automatic, you just have to keep doing it over and over and over again. And for
Well,
me,
I don't know if you know this, but 98% of the people that make New Year's resolutions don't keep it. Only 2% do. So I was thinking about this. I'm like, why don't people stay, on track? And I think number one, the biggest thing is they don't identify what's really important to them. I think what they do is New Year's Eve is coming along and they say to themselves, oh, I have to make a resolution or I have to do this. Most people don't even do it anymore. But the people that do it kind of feel pressured to do it. I want to get out of debt or want to find the love of my life or whatever. But you really have to identify something that's really important. And I think that's the first step. And I think most people don't even get to the first step.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
You mentioned a little bit about this, but what is the power of focus?
It's three things. It really comes down to knowing what you want, which is what's important to you, as I just said. Number two, making it a habit. It has to be a habit. So this is what I've learned, and I was shocked by this information. The average person has about 45 to 65,000 thoughts every single day, right? You remember that movie Groundhog Day with Bill Murray?
Yeah.
Okay. So the guy wakes up every single morning at 6 o'clock. The alarm goes off. It's the same darn song. And he's basically reliving his life. And we love that movie. I have it in the other room and I watch it on February 2nd. That movie is pretty much like most people's lives because we have 45 to 65,000 thoughts every single day. Now, the kicker, 90% of those thoughts are repeated the next day. So if you ask somebody at work tomorrow, hey, how's life, how's things? Same old, same old. And it's true. So we have a pattern. I have a pattern. You have a pattern. 45 to 65,000 thoughts every single day. 90% of them are the same. So the first step is to identify what you want, which is outside of those 45 to 65 thoughts, right? And then you have to reprogram your brain over and over again so that you get what you want. And that's what I talk about in the lecture, The Power of Focus.
Well, when I talk to people, I've done some motivational speaking myself, and my whole thing was get out of your comfort zone. Because I hate the comfort zone. I think it's just you become stagnant, it becomes boring, and I hate boredom. I love trying new things. I have so many interests. So I always tell people, I said, you know what, try something that you're uncomfortable with. 2 or 3 days later, that's going to be comfortable. Then jump out of your comfort zone again, try something new, and eventually all these things that we like you mentioned, it's going to become habit, it's going to become automatic, and you're going to feel comfortable. You're going to, like you said, going to the libraries before you went to the businesses. You don't just jump right at Procter and Gamble. All right, I'm ready. You have to just build it up, get better and better at it, and the only way you get better at doing something is to do it over and over again. So I love
think
that.
I think what it is people don't want to face the anxiety. We're all anxious. I mean, especially today, we're anxious. Here it is. What month is it? It's October, right? October 2020. This has been a crazy, crazy year for a lot of people. But even without what's been going on for the last 5-6 months, people have levels of anxiety. And when someone does something new, there's these thoughts: am I going to fail? Am I going to be able to do it? There's the feeling of success or failure. So I think the first step is to recognize that you're going to have anxiety. Like, there's no way that you're not going to be nervous about something. A woman wrote a book many years ago, feel the fear and do it anyway. Right. Yeah. Well, did you ever jump out of a plane?
Several times.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. Like,
it's funny. I call myself the stand-up skydiver. The last time I was in Tennessee, I did my act as I was jumping out of the plane and down into the ground. It was great. I have the whole thing. I'll send you the video. It's hilarious. Fun. So I was doing my whole stand-up act. So yeah, I really don't get nervous. It's funny. I don't know what happened, but I think that the nervous gene doesn't exist in me. People always say, you have like the fearless gene. And I must, because a lot of people will mention, and you brought up a great point, being anxious. One of the most things the biggest thing people get anxious about are speaking in public and dying. Those are like the two biggest things. And to me, I love speaking. The bigger the crowd, the better. I love a big crowd. I feel more comfortable. I mean, I feel comfortable, talking one-on-one, but within a big crowd, I feel just as comfortable, and I'm having a great time. But I guess that's not everybody.
Yeah, I can't wait to get out there again, and I can't wait to take you with me and have you open for me. I think the last time we did something together was the Happiness Club? Was that the gig? Yeah,
in
that was
Hartford.
kind of cool. I think there was like 40 people in the room. It wasn't a bad gig. It was nice.
No, and that led to what I'm going to be doing soon. I was supposed to do it last June. It got canceled. It's called The Second Act at the Palace Theater in Waterbury, and they just
Right.
contacted me. They want me to do the 2021 version of it. So I said, all right. So it looks like I'll be back at the Palace, and that's sort of
Good.
the second act is people over 50, where the first act was just a rehearsal.
Yeah, I feel that way. You know what? It's funny. I'm going to be 58 on Christmas. I feel like I'm in the prime of my life. I have friends that are retiring. They're in their 60s, and they're like, when are you going to retire? I'm like, what are you talking about? They worked at the post office. They worked in a store. They did something for 40 years, and they just can't wait to retire. Rich, I feel like I'm in the prime of my life. I won't want to retire, and I'm really happy about what I'm doing right now.
No, I feel the same way. I'm 52, and I tell people I work with people that are in their 20s, and they're like, "Oh," I said, "You're 25 years younger than me. What are you talking about?" They're like, "Rich, nobody is like you. I don't know where you get your energy from." I feel I'm doing the most I've ever done. I feel the best I've ever felt. So yeah, age is just all in your mind. I hate when people say, "Oh, I'm too old for this. I'm too old for that." As long as you're not neglecting your responsibilities, as long as you're paying your bills, as long as you're going to work, why can't you have fun? People think that when they reach a certain age, they have to stop living. And I don't agree with that at all. And obviously you don't either.
I think you have a different mindset. I know I have a different mindset, but I
Yeah.
recognize it in you. The average person, I don't know, they go to college, they get a job, they do something they don't like, and they can't wait to retire. And yeah, I don't know. When I was in high school, I said to myself, I don't want to do that. I don't want to put off my life for 40 years. I want to do what I want to do, and I want to do it now. I've always felt that way.
There is one word that I will never, ever utter, and that word is settle. I will never settle for anything. I do what
Right.
I want. If I want, if I want the job that I want, go for it. If I want the hobby that I want, I go for it. I'm just not going to say, "Oh, I don't have time for this. I'm too old for that." No, I just figure, why not? And you brought up failure. I want to bring this up really quick because I love that quote from Michael Jordan, and he brings up a great thing about failure. He goes, I was asked, I'm paraphrasing here, but 60 times I missed a rebound. I was supposed to take the winning shot 12 times. I missed 11 times. I failed over and over and over again. And that's why I succeed. Don't be afraid of failure. The only way you can succeed is if you fail.
Right. I agree. 100%. I mean, I've been in business for 20 years. Some of them made money. Some of them I lost money. I never stopped, Yeah, the person that succeeds, I think number one, illusion is that it's easy. I don't think it's easy at all. That's the first thing I would tell people. And the second thing is, you have to fail. And I don't think there really is anything to failure. As long as you learn something, how can you label it as failure? It doesn't make any sense to me. So if you tried something and it didn't work, but you learned something, why would you label that failure? And I think it comes from our school system, that you have to get the right answer. And if you don't, you look really bad. And I think it's part of brainwashing, and I think it's part of conditioning to keep the same. So I don't know if it's a conspiracy, but it does sound like a bunch of cows.
If it's not conspiracy, it's definitely conformity. And I don't like that either.
It's conformity. Yeah, it's conformity. It's like, we just want you to stay in line and do what you're told. And I don't know if you can tell this about me, but I was really rebellious in high school.
Really? I never had that idea from you.
Yeah, I did not like what I was hearing. One time I walked in with a needle this big. It was a big sewing needle, and I stuck it in my arm. And it was just an illusion. I think it was rubber cement. And I went up to the teacher and I says, "Can I go to the nurse? I basically have this needle in my arm."
Do you have a Band-Aid?
Yeah. Oh, she freaked out. Rich, she freaked out. She thought, I was just crazy. I mean, I just could not wait to get out of high school. So.
You know what I like about you is that another reason I think you're so successful is that you're open-minded. You're a pastor.
I am.
And
yeah.
No, say as a pastor, sometimes you see like I'm going to use this as an example. The Catholic priests, they believe in the 10 Commandments, believe the Bible is the word of God, and that's it. There's no other way. I like the fact that you can look at it and say, well, you know what? Maybe this is open to interpretation. Maybe we can look at it this way. You're open-minded, and you know that if something changes, you're not against it. And I like that about you.
You know what I think? You know what I think it is? I think it comes down to this. Like you and I are on different political sides, but we're still friends. And
Exactly.
I know people on Facebook, they can't even talk about politics. Now, I'm not saying I'm perfect. I've had some friends that I have unfollowed because I've just had it with them. But I think it comes down to just wanting to learn. Like I'm pretty solid in my faith, but at the same time, I don't have a problem listening to somebody else talk about their thing. You know what I mean? So I'm not so indoctrinated in the sense that I'm afraid that I have to fight for my position. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's the reason why I appear to be open-minded. I mean, I'm anchored, don't get me wrong. I don't want to be like a flake, or somebody that's not committed to something, but I'm not brainwashed into thinking that this is the only way to think. And a lot of that comes through NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. Did you ever study that at all?
No.
Neuro-linguistic programming started in the 70s with John Grinder and Richard Bandler, and it was basically out of the therapeutic world. But what they taught, and this is what I really learned, is every single one of us have a different map of reality. So like, think of your cell phone. You have a cell phone and you're looking at GPS. I'm looking at my cell phone. I have a GPS. Your friend does. Every one of us has a different map of reality. And maybe the reason why you and I are friends is because maybe my map and your map overlap each other on certain areas, But if we were to sit down and talk politics for a day, maybe we wouldn't want to be hanging around anymore. If we were to talk about, I don't know, something controversial. But I just look at it this way. No two people, even people that are married, they don't have identical maps. Even my sister, I grew up with my sister. She doesn't have the same map of reality that I have about even what happened to me when I was a kid, what happened to her when she was a kid. So I think that's what gives me flexibility. It's from my NLP training, which means flexibility is the key.
Yeah, well, you know what though? I like people that are different because if everybody go back to conformity, if everybody looked alike, talked alike, sounded alike, life would be boring. I like somebody with a different opinion. And it was Dalai Lama who had one of my favorite quotes. He goes, "When you talk, all you hear is everything you know. When you listen, you actually learn something." And like
Right.
you said, there's things that you and I completely disagree with. You're never going to convince me. I'm never going to convince you. I'm not even going to try, but I really don't care. We're friends
Right.
on so many
And
other. Yeah.
yeah, and I don't care either, and I also went through Dale Carnegie training, if that says anything. I used to work for the Dale Carnegie Company, how to
No,
win
you're off.
friends with people. So there's certain things you don't want to bring up in public because you're not going to win friends.
Yeah. Speaking of books, you mentioned a
Yeah.
book before. You wrote a book. Tell me about that.
I wrote an ebook and people can get a hold of it. It's called How to Use the Power of Your Mind. You just go to gregdwyerebook.com. It's just simply my name. What happened was I came back, I think it was a convention I went to in Vegas. I think it was out in Vegas. And I came back and I just sat down for a couple days and I just wrote this book. It's not long. It's basically a report. I think it's under 15 pages, but it talks about how to use the power of your mind. And the whole angle of it is, this magician, this former magician, is going to tell you how to focus and use the power of your mind. And it's an evergreen piece, meaning if you read it today or you read it 5 years from now, it would apply. It talks about meditation. It talks about focus. It talks about habit. It talks about gratitude. And if anybody wants it, they just have to go to www.gregdwyerebook.com. You put in your email. I don't charge anything for it. And then it goes right your email. But I like it because it's something that I'm proud of. It's something that is relevant, even though I wrote it 4 years ago. And I get good reviews on it. People come back and say, really, thank you. I've been following what you have said, and it's really changed my life, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, that is a good feeling.
Yeah.
I know I've done, my motivational speeches, even doing stand-up comedy. I've had people say, you know what, Rich, you really inspired me to do this. You really motivated me to do that. And it's a good feeling when you don't even realize you're just being yourself, just telling others what, you think is right. And people say, wow, that really made me feel good. That really changed my whole perspective. And that's happened to me several times. And I'm really proud of that. So what is the Entrepreneur's Inner Circle?
Okay. So it's a group in the UK that I belong to. It's a secret. So Rich, I can't tell you. No, just kidding. It's a group of people run by Ken Dine. to help performers become more of business-minded people. So I've been involved with it since 2016. What happened was I joined the group, and then shortly after, I was asked to speak in Vegas for the organization. They had a convention, and they let me be one of the speakers. Then they asked me to come out to the UK, to London, to give a presentation, which was pretty cool because I could put on my resume, international speaker now, right? And then I was asked to write for the organization. So every month I write an article. Every single person that's in the group, and there's about 100 of them, are either magicians or jugglers or comedians. They're performers, but they don't necessarily know how to market themselves. And so every month there's a question and answer. There's also a book that comes out that's mailed. In fact, I got mine today. And there's also online course. It's kind of like the master class, if you're familiar with the master class, for entrepreneur performers. And so I've been with them for 4 years, and I'm happy to say that I'm also writing for them. So that's kind of cool.
I never took that class, but doing all the different things I've done, I've had many people in other fields like comedy, authors. Can you help me promote myself? Can you help me market this? I just love, I actually enjoy the marketing and promoting aspect of it, which most people don't. Oh, I don't like talking about myself. I said, in order to get your name out there, you have to make it seem like if they don't go, they're going to miss the best show ever. Everybody's going to be talking about it, and you're the one that's going to be left out. And it's funny how many people ask me to help them market themselves or promote themselves. So I think I have a lot of the same, without taking that class, a lot of the same beliefs and a lot of training that you had, like, you know, how you do. I maybe was just born with that. That's my GPS.
Yeah, and you know Darren Brown out of the UK. Does that name ring a bell? He was in Broadway, I think, last year or maybe 2 years ago. Darren Brown, he's a mentalist. Do you know? Okay,
I
so I
definitely
watched the lecture. Yeah, I watched a lecture that he did a couple years ago, and someone asked him, "Hey, how do you become successful in business?" And they wanted to know because he's a big name in the UK, and he says two things. Two things are this, really simple. Number one, you have to be really good at what you do. So if you're a stand-up comedian or you're a motivational speaker or you're a magician, whatever you're doing, you have to be really, really good at what you do. You want to surround yourself with people that are going to, you know, help you and tweak it, and you really have to have a class act. Number two, you have to be really good at marketing. And so about 25 minutes later, they ask him another question, and he sits back and he goes, let me tell you what the answer to success is. Number one, you have to be really good. If you're not good, people are not going to rehire you. They're not going to give you word of mouth. And number two, you have to be good at marketing. You have to be both. And very few people can do both. Some people are really good artists. They know how to paint. They know how to play the guitar. They know how to sing or whatever, but they don't know how to promote themselves. And then you have some people that love to promote, but they're terrible. They, you know, you would never want to see their artwork or listen to their message. So you have to be able to have both. Or if you can't do it, you have to find people that are going to help you, you know, and it's not cheap. You know, you hire a graphic designer or somebody to edit, you know, they want hundreds of dollars to do some of this stuff. So it's a process. It takes time.
Speaking of promoting, that was a great segue. Two of the best ways to get the word out and promote yourself are radio and television, and you do both. So let's start with your podcast. Tell me about that.
Well, a good friend of mine, I've known this guy for 20 years. He just said to me one day, he goes, you want a podcast? I'm like, okay. So I don't know how many podcasts we've done. It's called Blog Talk Radio, but it's Sunday night at 5 o'clock. It's live. I mean, so maybe once or twice a year I do a rerun because I'm out of the country or something like that. But it starts at 5 o'clock exactly, gets over 5:30 exactly. There's a telephone number that you can call into. I think people can go to www.gregdwyerradio.com. So it's just my first name, gregdwyerradio.com. Your episode that we just did is on there. And there's hundreds of episodes. The weird thing about it is people are listening, but I don't know where they're from or who they are because I'm getting email responses from people. So I did it, I think religiously, pun intended, probably for like 4 years. I was going to quit about a year ago and I decided to stay with it. So, but that's what I do. It's not a real radio. It's obviously a podcast over the internet.
Well, you know what I love about podcasts and doing shows like this on YouTube? I interviewed Ted Neely, who played Jesus Christ and Jesus Christ Superstar. I had somebody comment from the Netherlands, tell me how much they loved this interview, how much they loved the show. So I love the fact, you know, I was in radio back in the 90s, And I was lucky if somebody heard it, the next state over. That was like, wow, somebody in Massachusetts is listening. Now somebody in the Netherlands is listening. And I love the fact with social media and, podcasts and Zoom shows and YouTube channels, you can get your word out all over the world, anytime, anywhere.
Right. Yeah. The world has changed. I feel this way. In some ways it's wonderful. And in some ways I'm kind of a little leery about the whole thing, so you know what I mean? It's like a double sword.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to what you were saying. It's great for promoting yourself, getting your word out, but then if people just use it to look at Facebook for 4 or 5 hours a day and they're just wasting their time, that to me is a waste. And I think it's dumbing down the nation, which we can get into a whole other conversation about that. I think that it's really, kids, we have the best technology ever. We can find out what's going on in China right now, and I think the kids are probably the dumbest they've ever been. Not everybody. I'm generalizing, but what I'm saying is that people can't read cursive writing anymore. They can't do simple math without a calculator. So unfortunately, I think that's where the social media is dumbing down the nation.
Yeah, I saw it in 1992. 1992, I was in Cleveland. It was my first church. And one of the guys from the congregation gave me a laptop that was refurnished for like $100. And then I, got on American Online and then got on, a website. Fortunately for me, I was able to buy my name, gregdwyer.com. I don't know why, but this guy said to me, he goes, what's your name? I says, Greg Dwyer. He goes, let me give you some advice. I said, what? He goes, you need to buy gregdwyer.com. I'm like, all right, I'll just do it. His name was Orville. So Orville, if you're listening, thank you. So I just bought gregdwyer.com, and I'm very happy that I did. But at the same time, I'm kind of sad that, I hear families sit around after dinner and they each have their tablets and they're all looking at their news, and it's all different, and people aren't communicating that much anymore. Kids don't know how to communicate. So again, and not to promote myself, but I think this topic, the power of focus, I want to get people to think about, hey man, what's really important to you? Is it knowing what's going on politically? Is it not, is it what's going on in the world as far as Facebook and Twitter? Or is there something else that's more important? Like maybe relationships, maybe that's more important, so that's kind of what I want to do,
Real relationships, not how many Facebook friends you have, how many real friends you have. And I think, unfortunately, things like Facebook and Instagram are making kids more depressed because people will put these fun pictures of themselves having the time of their life, and other kids will sit at home going, oh, my life sucks. I wish I had fun like this person. Meanwhile, that person's probably just as depressed, making themselves look fun to somebody else. So I think there's a lot more depression out there due to things like that. Everybody's trying to keep up with somebody else.
Did you see this thing on Netflix called The Social Dilemma?
No.
Okay, so I just watched it last week. It's called The Social Dilemma on Netflix. It says exactly, it's a documentary. It talks about exactly what you're talking about. That they interviewed people that used to work for Facebook and Twitter. Their agenda is to keep you addicted. That's the first agenda, to keep you addicted, that you come back over and over and over and over again. And second of all, suicides are on the rise, especially with kids in grammar school, because exactly what you just said. People are looking at it, they're examining their life and saying, my life sucks. I shouldn't say that, but my life is terrible. Yeah. And then some of them take their life, and it's terrible,
That's why, I can use me and you as examples. I do not compare myself to anybody at all. Like, I know I live my life. I don't really care what anybody else is doing. I'm having a good time, not bothering anybody. And if you like me, come along for the ride. If you don't, get out of the way.
Well, the other thing is you can't please everybody. I mean,
no, I don't want to.
Why bother?
Yeah,
why
exactly.
bother?
I don't want to. Right. I don't want to please it, because then you're not. There's no way you can keep everybody happy. And I would never try. But then if you are trying to keep everybody happy, you're not being yourself. And I'll give you an example on what I mean. With my stand-up comedy, because I have cerebral palsy, so I was doing a lot of jokes about that. And people are like, oh, you shouldn't joke about this, shouldn't joke about that. You have a bigger audience. I'm like, I really don't care how big the audience is. I have my rabid fans that come see me all the time, and they love me. And the people that don't like me, I don't mind either, because at least they're talking about me. If they hate me, They're talking about me. If they love me, they're talking about me. What would be the worst? You're like, oh, what did you think of Rich Sayre? Who? What are you talking? Oh, was that guy on stage? I don't even remember what his jokes were. But so I never tried that. I'm just using comedy as an example, but same thing with writing. There were people that read my stories like, oh my God, that's not good. I don't like that. And they're like, well, you know what? That's not your cup of tea. Other people said, Rich, I love that story. When you coming out with your next book? So you do it for yourself and the people will be there. Don't try to please anybody else. And luckily I was always like that. My mentality was, so I've never really been depressed. I've never really cared what anybody thought of me. And I'm the happiest I've ever been.
Well, I mean, one of the things that really has impressed me about this whole political campaign on both sides is you got people that think one person is great, the other one thinks the other one isn't. You have celebrities like, I don't know, I don't need to mention names, but just a celebrity, a singer. People say, oh, I don't like her, I do like her. And you think to yourself, you can't please everybody. I mean, it's impossible. And why bother? I mean, you don't want to come to the end of your life and say, wow, I really just wanted to be all things to all people. And I never really got a chance to express myself. This is who I am. Take it or leave it is what I hear you're saying, Rich.
Yeah. Well, no, this just happened literally today. I was reading this. David Crosby from Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young. Yeah. Somebody asked him, hey, what'd you think of Eddie Van Halen? His only response was, meh. MEH. People are saying, ban David Crosby. Oh my God, I'm never going to buy another record from him again. He's horrible. Never see him in concert. I said, all you use 3 letters, MEH. And I mean, obviously he's a legend and he really doesn't care. He's not going to be losing any sleep over people getting mad. But the fact that people are getting so upset for somebody going, he's not really my cup of tea. Oh my, I mean, so that's it. Social media has gotten so bad. That's another whole conversation where, it's either us against them. If you don't agree with me, you're not my friend. I don't want anything to do with you. And that's what it's become.
It reminds me of my high school. It reminds me of grammar school.
Yes, exactly. That is funny. Let's get back to you. But actually, this is pretty much all about you, because a lot of this you talk about and you incorporate into, like, be yourself, do what you want to do, and focus, the power of focus.
Right.
So the other thing you mentioned it before, besides the podcast, which is great, you also have a TV show called Mindful Conversations. Now, is it primarily an interview show?
Yeah. What happened was my neighbor in Bantam, here where I live, said, hey, you got to go call up Carol Moore and be on her show. So I did. I went on her show. And about a year later, I went on her show again, and she was interviewing me for cable television. And as I was walking out, Doug, the producer, said something to me like, hey, would you like a show? And I had been thinking, while I was on the show, yeah, I'd love to do this. So I said, Doug, yeah, let's do it. He goes, no, go home and think about it. I said, Doug, I don't have to think about it. Let's do it. So we did maybe 4 or 5 shows in months. And then we went to the point of doing a show every week. It's an interview. I bring people on. The name of it is called Mindful Conversations. We don't script it. This is one of the things. Just like I don't have the questions you're asking me beforehand. I don't ask the people any of these questions before I interview them. We have a conversation, and that's it. And then out of that, another television studio in Farmington, Connecticut picked me up, and we did another show called Mindful Conversations After Hours, as you know. And they're running right now without me because both TV shows are done. They're dark. They're not filming. But it's interview style, and it's basically being curious about people. About it is it reaches thousands of people.
What kind of guests do you have on your show?
Crazy people like you.
No, I love it because you have paranormal investigators like Zach, or is that his name? What's his name?
Oh, John Zaffis. Yeah, John
Zaffis. I'm thinking, John Zaffis. Sorry, he's Ed and Lorraine Warren's nephew.
Yeah, and that was fun. That was really fun.
I've seen authors on there. You've had me on there. Yeah. So you basically
business people. Yep.
Somebody asked me. They said, well, "What kind of guests do you have on your show?" I said, "Anybody who's interesting. I don't really care what they do as long as they're interesting." Because there's so many. I'm the same way as you. I am very curious. I love learning about people. I love learning new things. So I will have, I've had actors, musicians, motivational speakers. I had the people that own the Conjuring House on. So I mean, I'll interview anybody. There's a guy. He's going to be on the show soon. He was on a TV show called Holy Moly. It's a human mini golf course. It was a TV show. I met him at a mini golf convention. I said, "Hey, you want to be on the show?" And it's just interesting. He goes around reviewing mini golf courses all over the world. So it's
wow.
Yeah. So it's just I'm just like you. where I like interviewing people that are interesting. And I watch your show, I listen to your podcast, and it's always entertaining.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm always looking for guests. Hopefully next year we're going to get back into the TV thing. Right now, we haven't done anything. So it is what it is, right?
It is. Well, that's a great follow-up right now, because what's next and where can people find you?
Best way to get a hold of me is just my name, gregdwyer.com. If they want to read my ebook, they can go to gregdwyerebook.com. You can download that for free. But you can find me on social media. I'm not that much on Facebook anymore. One thing that is really kind of cool is if you go to gregdwyer.com, there actually is a quiz that you can take that, talks about attention and focus. And what I love about it is it only takes about 5 seconds and you have the results immediately. So that's kind of cool. We wouldn't want to tell someone, hey, look, fill this information out. We'll get back to you in a week, because people forget that they filled it out, right? But yeah, if you go to gregdwyer.com, there's a quiz there and they can put that information in, take the quiz and see if you pass. I got to tell you, out of 100 people that take it, only one person maybe out of 100 gets all the right answers. So it's pretty interesting.
I'm going to be taking that very soon. I'm curious to see what I get.
Yeah.
Greg, it's been great having you on the show. You've done so many things, and I can only imagine what you're going to be doing next. I mean, pastor, magician, motivational speaker, entrepreneur, friend of David Letterman. What haven't you done?
Yeah, that was kind of cool. My 15 minutes of fame. And thank you for having me on this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, great guest, and come back anytime.
Thanks so much.
All right, well, that wraps up another episode of the Claw's Corner, the Zoom edition. I would like to thank my guest, pastor, magician, author, motivational speaker, podcaster, and television host Greg Dwyer for being on the show. And I would also like to thank you, the viewer, for tuning in. Enjoy your day, everyone.